You want to be straightened out. You want to not have to fight life and things and your addiction anymore. Get your joy and pleasure out of things of nature. Then, look, our addiction, what it does, it brings us into finite. We become more all about the food or about the drugs, the alcohol, or about person, right? Resentment, anger towards a person, whatever it is. We miss the whole concept of the universe, the whole idea of becoming one, enjoying nature, enjoying people, having compassion and love for them. The ego is a dream. And, it's always about the past, the depression, or the future's anxiety, or the hunger and the pain comes from being told, with commercials on TV, the big corporations with all their money and everything, billions of dollars. And I have an article here, a psychologist wrote, he says he was hired by these companies, not only with the scientists of the day hired to figure out the chemicals that go inside your brain in these foods. A lot of foods have 50 chemicals in it, right? Look at the packaging. And they're all poison. So if they go into the brain, but also psychologically how the packaging and the look of it and the sense and the color of the food. And it's a real crime. I mean, in the food market, they put all this poison at the height of so children can see it, or they advertise it on cartoons on TV, whatever it is from an early age. Or they give the children these jars full of like the sugar and all of this stuff at a very young age. If you take a really, really young infant, a toddler, they're not interested in that. They spit it out. They're interested in drinking wholesome stuff, They go for the fruits and vegetables until we start stuffing down their throat. The whole thing is this, look. There is a solution to this problem that you've been struggling all along, but it only comes through the perception change, looking at food. Again, in my spiritual awakening was when I want, my body's God's temple. I want happy, glorious, wholesome food. I always say, people, what kind of diet are you on? I'm actually on a whole food, plant-based diet. Okay, whole food, plant-based. But I always say that it doesn't matter. The whole problem is in our society today is what we put on the food. The corporations put on the food. It's called processed food. Processed food. The soil, the alternate, the sugar, the hydrogenated synthetic stuff. It's all there to get it. It goes into the brain, get us addicted, but it's usually 3 times the calories as the normal food. The synthetic sugars and all of that. If you like the video and want to spread the message, press the like and subscribe button. Thank you. After a while, when we stop having all this junk, diet soda has that synthetic stuff in it. Then our palate changes when we eat wholesome naturally. Then you can glorify in the taste of, with me, the vegetables, the carrots, the broccolis. Here, I have a list of them here. I mean, just think, because I always hold up the fruit. I have the fruit here, but, not the Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, carrots, snow peas, butter lettuce, spinach, chard, arugula, radicchio. I mean, you name it. In the dressings, you can make wholesome, natural, cider vinegar, mustard. I'm just saying. This is real food. This is the real joy and happiness. It's really meant. That's God's gift to us. And I hope, and the amount of nutrients and the health and the fiber, it's amazing. I always have the apple, the orange here, right? And I have the water. God, this is God. This alone, I always say this. You want to have a spiritual awakening, you want to have a great day, get used to drinking healthy, normal water. Just the taste of it is just amazing when you get off. Even juice is processed. They take the fiber out and they make it condensed. These are all processed foods. Have something wholesome, natural. If you want juice, have it in an orange or the apple. The nutrients in here, again, I'm a registered pharmacist. I know somewhat about this. And the vitamins that are in these compounds, in these foods, are a million times more of them, the health, than taking a vitamin or supplements. It's all in there. It's all in the food, the kale, the greens, and all of these things. Just don't eat the poison. You want to know the truth from the false? The truth is that a lot of that stuff in the ingredients you read should have one ingredient. The food has 49 of them are poison when you see 50 ingredients on there. But after a while, you'll want the wholesome natural sugar. People say, well, they're addicted to sugar. They have this food addiction in the recovery or binge eating because of the sugar. The fruit and the vegetables I showed you, they all have sugar in them, but wholesome natural sugar, along with the fiber. That's what's amazingly healthy. And I'm not talking from nowhere. I had all of these diseases and all these medications, and this is going back maybe 13 years ago. I started eating healthy, and I lost the weight. The type 2 diabetes went away on 2 medications or 3 medications for that. I would have ended up probably taking insulin for that. Had 2 for the high blood pressure, for cholesterol. I was on between 8 and 10 medications. I'm on 0 now. And now, how much years later? 13 years later in my life? They wanted to put a stent into my heart. I'm telling you all of these things just because this is what happened to me. But I got the health from eating the food. Now, I'm perfectly healthy. My lab values are like a teenager. Can you believe that? I'm over 70 years old. I'm just saying this because it is so true what healthy eating, a healthy lifestyle can do for you. But and again, I don't have to struggle anymore. We have that, I always read the 10-step promises. We're not fighting it. We're not swearing it off. Because the diets don't work, because that's what we're trying to do. And with the pills, and even a stomach surgery. All of these things we do in our life, try through self-will, that it has to be a perception change. Otherwise, it's not going to help. So the answer to our addictions is really simple, but we make it more complicated. We're in a scientific age, and we want to figure it out. But the main thing is, and I always refer to this, because in the doc's opinion, Dr. Silkworth said an amazing thing, and this was in the 1930s. He said the doctors and scientists of the day couldn't figure it out. Okay? How many years later, and how many what's the difference now? We go into the internet, to the moon. We've done all of these major scientific discoveries. And let me know if anybody here knows about any scientific discovery they made to get us out of the addiction to alcohol, out of the addiction to food. If anybody knows, let us know at the meeting. But it's pretty amazing. There's only one solution, 99%. I used to say 95 on this meeting. I was reading those somewhere, and I really took it to heart to say 99% of diets fail. And I'm talking about billion-dollar industries that try to figure this out with the diet. And again, I listened to a lecture about a month ago on the internet, and it was all these experts, dietitians, doctors, psychologists, you name it, they were there. And they all talked about this way of this diet and that diet. And the one word I didn't hear was spirituality, a spiritual way out of this. Everything they talked about was bringing us back into the human experience. I can do it. It was through self-will. And We Agnostics talks about rising above our problems. It talks about the only answer is a spiritual solution. And when we become more spiritual, it talks about in the big book, we straighten out mentally and physically. When I first came into a meeting at Overeaters Anonymous, I said, I want my food plan and I'm out of here. And actually, it's interesting because I did get a food plan. It was called the Gray Sheet. And I did it for about a year. I lost all the weight. It worked beautifully, but I was miserable every day. That was the only problem. And that day actually came. I just couldn't take it anymore, right? It didn't become important what weight I had. So really, the reason I did it was to be happy. And once we're happy and find our happiness through a spiritual means, not things of what's called the flesh, gluttony being one of them. Think about this. Think of the relationship that I'm talking about here. The happiness and joy which we look for food to give us. And it's things of the flesh which only gives us momentary pleasure. If you like the video and want to spread the message, press the like and subscribe button. Thank you. Right? There's a saying that abstinence tastes better than food, if you ever heard that. The joy of finding joy in everyday things, in our nourishment, I call it spiritual bread from the universe and things around us, is a million times better because it's not momentary. And pleasure, on the other side of pleasure, is always a lot of pain. Because we always say, I got a good idea, I'll make more money, I'll be more successful, I'll have more food. But then we always want more and the desire never ends. So we're put on a basis of living that way. So spiritual answer to our problems. And also in our steps, the way out is through the steps, having had that spiritual awakening, perceiving life differently, coming from a different basis of living. Many places in the big book it talks about, and the steps all talks about that. Because we're really spiritual beings living in the human experience. So we have a disease of the mind. The disease of the mind is what the corporations tell us about the food. The disease of the mind is what we grew up and everything about. The movie stars. We live in a real, materialistic, right, society. So to be happy, we had to be more successful, be like movie stars, be that perfect weight. But the answer isn't in that. The answer is how to be happy and joyous. And in Bill's story, actually on page 15, he talks about that. He says, on page 15. He talks about what happened to him after he went through the steps with Evie. The joy of living, near the middle of the bottom of the page, we really have even under pressure and difficulty. That's pretty amazing. And here's another one. And also, you know what? This to me started reminding me of Mother's Day. Because Mother's Day should be a happy and joyous. And it's interesting. It says here, the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. On page 15, after Bill goes through the steps. Because Mother's Day, we're talking about family. And how many of us have resentment and anger and fear? It's really based on self-centered fear. So it's a disease of the mind where we interpret or think that people resentment and the anger we have towards people. So today's a good day, not only with our food addiction, right, to be glorious and happy, but it's the answer to all our problems, it says in here. The solution to all our problems. On page 13 in Bill's story, it says that. So you want the solution to your food addiction today, because today's a lot of times about eating. You want your solution to how to be happy and joyous with your family members. This is the solution. The other way is being miserable. Being into the addiction, making it about people. People are going to fail us all the time. It's all falseness of the mind. It's a dream of the ego. The ego is going to set us wrong every time. But when we get out of that experience and become more centered and spiritual, we have God consciousness. So here we go. So again, people at this meeting, when I went to meetings, and you speak about this, and the programs, the 12-step program speaks about the spiritual awakening. How is this in any way related to our addiction? Again, going back to the reason we do what we do as far as addiction is for pleasure, but momentary pleasure only. We have, again, a solution here, how to be happy. And out of this delusion of the mind and new perception, the only way towards our addictions is to see it differently. The only way in our addiction to people and being miserable, upset, or even if you feel admirable about somebody and they reject you or something like that, we can put on a new pair of glasses and realize life is not about people or our children or family members. It's about our joy and happiness is from within here. We can't find it on the outside. And the more we look, the more I searched, the more miserable I became. I became miserable. Now I'm in the solution. I have a solution. And any time during the day I have these thoughts about food or my addictions. I was on drugs and alcohol. I have thoughts about resentment, anger, fear. If you're getting about the old self, and it talks about on page 63 being reborn. How to be happy. That was the topic I have in there. And it's interesting. We live in the disease of the ego, right? We live in a dream. And when we relate to, again, going to our addictions, but one of the main ones here, and a lot of people here for the food addiction, it's a dream of the mind, right? It's something and that's why the topic is how to be happy, because the reason we go to our addictions is because we have a false sense of what really happiness is. It's momentary pleasure. So we can, at this meeting today, and we talked about, somebody asked, how do we do this? Through the 12 steps and the big book, we have a solution to a problem. And also it says in the big book, an answer to all our problems. So it's really how to be happy, to enjoy living. And a lot of us are addicted. We have food addictions. So food addiction recovery we're looking for, binge eating. Also, as far as food is concerned, as I always read in the forward to the second edition, in the Overeaters Anonymous 12 and 12, it talks about horrify what we were doing to ourselves with food. We became obsessed with diets. It starts by talking about that. But the different types of food addictions, on the very beginning, it talks about a way to recover from the disease of compulsive overeating. We use compulsive overeating and compulsive eating interchangeably. These terms include, but are not limited to, overeating, undereating, food addiction, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, overexercise and purging, and other compulsive food behaviors. So it's really about food addiction. We're looking to food addiction recovery from it, binge eating. But the point is that what we're doing is, again, attacking from the point of view, and the topic is how to be happy. So here you come to maybe a meeting. Some people think they'll get recovery from their food addiction, and the topic is how to be happy. So that alone, if I saw that, I'd say this isn't for me. The quality and the healthiness of the food. And again, to be happy and, talking about the joy of living. And I had read here, even all it says, Bill said, Again, the most impossible domestic situations, rioted, feuds, and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. And he goes, this on page 15, this is after he does the steps and he has a perception change. That's spiritual awakening. And he says, there is scarcely any form of trouble or misery which has not been overcome among us. Any form. It's talking about in any form. Food addiction is a sign of the ego. Right? It's related to everything. Everything in our life has to do with the self and the dream of the mind. You know, we're in a dream. The mind is the ego, and the intellect tries to conjure up all of these things what people told us how to think or feel, especially with the food. It's all about the food today, right? Not spiritual. Getting it. Some people think they get the nutrients from the sun or the nature. Just being outdoors, and the perception change. I think a person who has normalcy towards food doesn't need to be in food addiction recovery, or they don't have binge eating, or they don't have anorexia, bulimia, all of these things. Their obsession comes from other things of enjoyment, but we coming from the material, food being one of them. Food is a material thing like everything else. But anyway, with all that being said, happy Mother's Day again for everybody who just came here. And we can apply these principles in all our affairs. So today, during the day, enjoy, get out of the resentment or anger if you have any, get out of the gluttony, right? It's in the 7 deadly sins. It's all related. In our book talks about pride. So we have a solution here to all our problems, it says.